What is going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today, Wednesday, December 28th, 2022, the final episode of 2022. I am your host, Sean Murphy, alongside my guy, Jeff Iafredi. Jeff, what's going on, brother? Good to see you, my guy.
Yes, good to see you guys. I got my Detroit basketball shirt on over here, as you can see. I was there last night, and I can't wait to get into it because I got some funny stories that I told you guys already. But a lot to get into, man. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, I'm just blaming you single-handedly, Jeff. That's
Yeah,
all I'm going to say.
I,
But
I accept.
also, but here as well is my guy, Troy Sergey. Troy, last night, as of recording, we're recording on Tuesday night. Last night, you were at a Monday Night Football game, and you ended up making a pretty damn good decision, missing a Pistons game.
Yeah, certainly did. I was at Chargers and Colts on Monday night, and it was a great football game. Certainly Chargers proved themselves as a playoff team. We'll see what they can do. Justin Herbert, top 5 player, quarterback, I would say, in the league, and it was great to see him in person. I very much enjoyed my Monday night with family and wife, and it was just a great opportunity.
You guys all have matching Herbert jerseys?
We do, yes, we did.
Yeah, so Troy, you want to tell a little bit of a background on that?
Yeah, so my stepdad is co-workers with Justin's dad. They've known each other for 20 plus years. He's met Justin, I think, just once when Justin was like 13 or 14 years old. So Justin does not know my stepfather, but they certainly, his father and my stepfather get along great. And his dad was at the game, got to wave hello to him. He saw us, and my stepdad was able to walk down and talk a little bit with him. So yeah, it was great opportunity, small world. Never in a million years would you think that, when you're meeting your coworker's 13-year-old son, he'd be an NFL player, let alone the success Herbert's had in year 3. So pretty darn cool. Small world. But the connections are really, really neat when you can make them in this world.
That's a random connection.
It's a random connection, but
yeah, just like randomly just like your stepdad's like, oh yeah, my coworker, his son's Justin Herbert.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
what the
yeah,
like, what?
Yeah.
I gotta imagine. Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't bring that up very often. I'm sure it's something he doesn't like to talk about.
He talks about it. He talks about it.
I know. I'm being very sarcastic. Very sarcastic. But speaking of things to talk about, guys, whoo-wee, for the final episode of 2022, is it a packed one? So we may as well get right into it. Our guy, Detroit Kool-Aid, should be joining us here pretty soon. Brandon Dent, Pistons beat writer for Woodward Sports, is just running a little bit late. So we're just getting this thing here started because this is From Half Court Reach, and every week we talk all things NBA basketball. If you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and be sure you share it with your friends and join in the conversation down below in the comment section. But also, be sure you follow all of us on social media so you don't miss anything that we're up to, like my guy at Jeff Iafredi, my boy Troy Sergey 44, my guy Kool-Aid at Detroit Kool-Aid, and myself at Sean Half Court. But with that, gentlemen, let's get right into it because the NBA world was a busy one this weekend. In particular, the Detroit Pistons. There's a lot to dive into there. First of all, real quickly, Troy, I did just want to say I am glad for you that you were in the building. Because we talk about like a notorious sports moment. We talk about the one that we're going to be diving into. I'm just glad that you were in the building for this. And just got to witness everything about that. Did you?
I was there, Sean. I was there.
Yep. What was it like seeing that bodacious booty of Brandon Staley just right up on that field?
It was an experience that I will remember forever. It will be an experience I will tell my kids, my grandkids. A moment, one of those, top 3 moments in your life, your wedding day, the birth of your kids, and seeing that booty stretch. So
there's the wedding cake, and then there's the Staley cake. You know what I'm saying?
It's like where were you when Brandon Staley did yoga on the sideline?
Yeah, I know Jeff was at a Pistons game.
Yeah. So speaking of, Troy was in the building for that epic sports moment. Jeff, you were in the building for about 45 minutes of that Clippers Pistons game. Would you like to tell me your experience last night and what you went through on Monday during the Clippers Pistons game? And would you like to tell us why it's your fault that the Pistons lost?
Yeah, no, I got a confession. I take 100% of the blame for what unfolded yesterday night. And honestly, before I even start, shout out to Booner, by the way. He wasn't feeling good. Hope he feels better. He had free tickets. And as a good friend, he said, "Hey, Jeff, you want to go to the game?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Day after Christmas, we'll see what the turnout looks like." So me and my buddy went down to LCA. It was a packed act. It was actually pretty packed, to my surprise. It was a good turnout, a good environment. And honestly, the Pistons did play a good 2.5 and then solid quarters where they had a majority of the time. They had the lead. And then the third quarter, they go down double digits. They claw back. The crowd's in it. They're excited. Killian Hayes has an amazing first quarter. And then the fourth quarter started. They're hanging in it. And there's about 5 minutes left in the game. And as it's coming down, I look at my buddy and I go, you know what? Let's get out of here with about 3 minutes left. Because
Jeff, it is full dumb McStupid head move goes, let's beat traffic.
Now, mind you, if it wasn't as big of a turnout as I expect, there was a lot of people there, I probably would have stayed. But I had work the next day. My buddy had work. You know what? Let's beat traffic. The Pistons were up 14 with 3 minutes left, I believe. So we walk out. People are walking out. I get to my car. We drive away. And I'm talking to my buddy about it. Hey, man, what a game. Pistons played well. It was everything you wanted. Obviously, defensively, they didn't play well, but what's new? But offensively, a lot of guys shine, young players. I looked at my buddy. I'm like, this is what it feels like to go to a Pistons game, man.
So,
I mean,
do you remember specifically when in the game you left? Did you leave when Tyronn Lue put in his bench unit?
So it was right as I was getting up out of my seat, the horn sounded. Tyronn Lue pretty much said, "Pack it up, we're done. Let's go to Toronto the following day. We're packing up here." I'm walking out. People are walking out. And anyway, so I get to my car. I'm driving away. While I'm on the highway, I go, you know what? Let's check. I just want to check the stats. So I pull up ESPN. I look at the score. And I'm sitting there staring at my phone. And I'm like, I'm shot. I'm like, wait, number one, before I even noticed the result, I go, they went to OT. And on top of that, they lost in OT by 10. Mm-hmm. So now I'm sitting there, I'm appalled. So I had to wait till I got home to really dissect it, watch back the game, see what the hell happened. And then the stat came out on ESPN. What was it? The teams that were trailing down 14 since 1997 were 2, now 3 in 12,800. So all of these things combined, I sat there in my room last night and I'm like, you know what? It probably was my fault because when I was in the building, Pistons were playing pretty well. They were closing that game. And then everything went to complete, you know what. So again, I didn't witness it. So maybe that was better for my mental health. I didn't witness it. But when I did the show this morning on Woodward, on the Morning Woodward show, I let out all my frustration. What a morning, having to dissect all that and wake up and have to process that they threw a 14-point lead with 3 minutes left.
Mm-hmm. Actually, 2 minutes and 57 seconds, which makes
so the stat that Jeff's referring to is from ESPN Stats. Entering Monday, teams are 2 in 12,873 when trailing by 14 plus with 3 minutes remaining in the play-by-play era since 1996-97. So essentially since we were born. And the Clippers were 0 and 417 in that scenario.
You know what's messed up too, just before you go, Sean, is the fact that not only did he bench the starters, Paul George didn't even come back in the game. I looked back and watched until 30 seconds left. This was and again, the Clippers, they have a good bench, but there is no reason why. And then they score 3 in OT. I mean, that was probably the lowest point, or it is no doubt the lowest point of the season so far. It was disappointing.
So I'm actually glad that you brought up the bench thing because we actually, if you guys remember, we actually had a pretty significant talk about the Pistons bench about a week or two ago and about their elevated play and what that was doing for the team at the time, and what that meant for them. If you look as a whole, throughout the season, one of the things over the course of the last month, the Clippers have what are the better bench units in a certain sense, but at the same time, it's not one of those units where it's like good enough to where it's like, all right, I'm fine with that. Like it was guys like, you know, like Trey Mann, you know, like Luke, like obviously they have guys like Luke Kennard. They, you know, it wasn't exactly like they had their greatest lineup out there. And, you know, Isaiah Stewart said it after the game. And listen, quite frankly, I think it's an understatement. Like they took it for granted. They took their foot off the gas, and the Clippers waved the flag, and so did the Pistons. Well, you know, the Clippers, you know, like Tyronn Lue signified that the game was over by putting in, you know, his second unit. But the thing that we know in this league is that until the bell rings, until that horn sounds, there is no over. Like this, like the game's not done. So, you know, I listen, it's one of those things where I think it's a hard lesson to learn, you know, like just in general in this league that, you know, anything can happen if you just take a game for granted. But I think now more than ever, I think last night, you know, I called it. I did a video, you know, that came out, you know, Tuesday, and I even went live talking about it after, just because I just wanted to get my emotions out, or just like my like just process my thoughts. And I think this is the rock bottom moment of the rebuild. Like I would say this is the lowest point of the rebuild so far. And I say, and I think the reason why is because if you just use this point kind of like as like a checkpoint for where we're at in the season, like what struggles we're facing, and you know, like what things we're going through. Like I would say like one of the big things is that this team's bad defensively, and it just seems like it's like they're not getting better. To me, I don't know about you guys, but it seems to me like a lot of their problems on the defensive end come down to communication, a lot of missed rotations, a lot of miscues. And when guys make individual mistakes, and you know, guys like Beef Stew and Jalen Duren have to come in and try and aid and, you know, draw fouls, and you know, even guys like Killian, you know, if he lets guys by, he can over foul sometimes too. Like to me, like there's just a lot of, you know, miscues that lead up, that like add up, right? Like, especially when you're a young team, 24 seconds isn't a lot on a shot clock, but it's enough it's enough time to let a bad defensive team have miscues and mishaps, right? And, you know, I think the other thing as well is you want to see this team, learn how to close out games and learn how to overcome this, you know, whatever this focus issue is. And to their credit, they had their best third quarter of the season. But that doesn't mean anything when you cause cheap turnovers in the final couple minutes, when you stop making active decisions with the basketball. And it just seems like they went away from everything that was working and got them there in the first place, right? So it's one of those things where I don't want to come into this and just make this be a Pistons bash session. Everything sucks. Woe is Pistons, because I still believe that there is a lot to be invested in, that there's a lot to be optimistic about. But quite frankly, even in a rebuilding season, even in a year where you're one of the worst teams in the league, even though like we've come to this podcast and said like this season isn't about the wins and losses. But you know what we have said? That this rebuild needs to show signs of life.
Yeah.
This rebuild needs to show progress. This rebuild needs to show that progression, and that things are evolving, that things are getting better, right? And although I still believe that this team is going to be okay, and that, you know, next year I still think they're going to be ready to turn the corner. They're not going to be able to until they get over this. And in my opinion, like, you know, like each team has their hills they have to climb. Each team has their adversity they have to overcome. But when you're a team that really can't, like, really has no room for error and you just, it almost felt like, and James Edwards said it really well in his article. It almost felt like they metaphorically like puffed out their chests and felt like they were the superior team. When in reality, they have no right to feel that way at this current time. I'm sorry, they don't. And that's it's an organization we all love, but that's just the reality. So, Jeff, as the person that was in the building, and like obviously, like I know you said that you had your time to vent on the morning show. Now that you've had some time to process it, now that you've heard what I've had to say, do you agree? What are your thoughts? And is like what stands out to you as far as like particular things that need to be addressed?
I think the big picture for this team, especially not having your franchise player in Cade, is learning how to win. And that sounds cliche, but that really is part of it. I know last night, and that's why it's hard, because when you blow a lead like that, the good things kind of do get buried at the same time. Like for me, there was a lot of good things to take away from last night, despite how it ended in the last 3 minutes. I mean, if you watch Isaiah Stewart throughout the game, I mean, he had one of his better games of the season. Jalen Duren, Killian Hayes, Sadiq Bey hit some big shots. I loved how Dwane, it was a 9-man rotation, and you had Hamidou Diallo playing, and he had some big shots. He had big plays in that game as well. There's tons of things to take away, at least for the future. Like, I agree completely with you. This doesn't change how we view the future, but what it does do is frustrate fans, because they were waiting for that moment. Last night was that moment for them. That was a big win. They did need that, some of that momentum they did need, and they just weren't able to close it out. And Isaiah Stewart's quote after the game, and you could tell the locker room understands what's at stake just in general and what the outside noise is. Even though they don't let it get to them, they still know the narrative, and how he said, this isn't on coaching. This is on us. This is on the players. It's our job to go out there and execute, close these games.
People aren't going to want to hear this, by the way, but he's 100% right.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it is. I mean, whether people want to admit it or not, like for Dwane Casey, he's in a tough position, because especially at the end of that game in OT, and when I rewatched it back, there's that, do you play veterans and try to win games? And then if you don't win the games, you're going to get criticized for benching your young players? Or do you play young players and lose a game and get criticized for losing the game? And last night, for example, perfect example is Burks played in OT, didn't play very well. And the narrative comes out, why didn't Ivy play more in OT? It's like, what do you want him to do?
No one was making a shot. No one was defending.
Right.
Well. No one.
It doesn't. So again, to your point, Sean, the future, it doesn't change how I view the future. It is frustrating. It is one of the lower points, if not the lowest point, to your point, of the season. But at the same time, this team, and I know it's cliche, but they have to learn how to win. And honestly, I will say this about Dwane, because what frustrated me is when they were collapsing and they had that meltdown, there has to be a moment, and it is the players. They have to go out there and execute. But there has to be a point where you got to stop the bleeding, and they didn't do that. So whether that's Dwane or the player's fault, whatever it is, they didn't stop the bleeding. And that was a tough loss. That loss can either bring a locker room closer or create frustration with how things are going currently. So I think personally, with the person Dwane is and how he's done so far, I think this is going to bring these guys closer together, and they're going to come together and work on it. Because sometimes you need moments like this. We talked about the Lions getting smacked in the mouth last week. Sometimes you need a loss like that, where you looked as good as they did, but they didn't close it, just so everybody can sit and be like, look at that. We had that game in the bag, and we couldn't close it. So again, in my opinion, I do think this is beneficial for them moving forward, but we got to find out.
I also, for me, like what gave me, because like last night I went live, and one of the things I said was I wasn't going to comment on, on the Dwane Casey aspect of things, because to be honest with you, I wanted to give myself some time to see where I really landed on that. And like, it's not a secret that the third quarter thing has been a consistent issue over this season, but I think, if you actually look at it over the last couple seasons, it has been somewhat of an issue in Coach Casey's tenure. Like whether that's like having a young roster, whether that's, like whether something needs to change with the approach, or, like that's like a whole other conversation. Really, no one knows what's happening in that locker room except those guys. Right. But, you know, at the same time, I know a lot of people are quick to look at coaching, but at the root of it, Dwane Casey had this team up 14 with just over 3 minutes to go.
Yep.
He had Tyronn Lue, who we all would agree is one of the best head coaches in the NBA, right? Like people could say whatever they want about Dwane Casey. Tyronn Lue, we know who he is, right? Tyronn Lue waved the white flag and put in his bench. At that point, you know, like sure, like Dwane Casey could have brought these guys back, you know, to the bench maybe a little sooner, maybe smack some sense into them. But it's not like he wasn't trying to do that during the game. It's not like there weren't times where he was doing that during the game. And by the time they were trying to get re-engaged and they were trying to create stuff, it's pretty clear that they got that their youth showed, they got scared, and ultimately they just let it slip out of their hands because they realized that it was, you know, falling away from them before they could even do anything, you know? But Troy, I want to get your perspective because I want to know, you know, what, like, you know, first of all, how you found out because you were at the game.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine you probably, I knowing you were probably, you probably weren't watching the game, but you were definitely regularly checking in. Right.
That was 100% right. And I remember, so I remember looking at the score with, I think, 5 minutes to go. So not quite 3, but 5. And they were up. I can't remember how much they were up by, maybe 8.
Did you go back and watch it, by the way?
What's that?
Did you go back and watch?
I watched the NBA highlights, the 11-minute highlight reel.
Okay.
So I watched pretty much every basket. And I was like, oh, you know, they're gonna win. And then I was like, oh, hey, let's see how much. And like probably like an hour and a half after the game, I checked the score and I was like, wait, they lost? They lost? Like I wonder how they lost. And then it wasn't until maybe even another hour after that I saw the stat, the 2 and 16,000 stat.
Yeah, 12,000. Yeah,
12,000. Yeah.
What does it matter?
When
it gets up to 10K plus,
it ain't good.
Yeah, it's a metric crap ton, is what it really is.
Right. So once I saw that, I was like, man, I didn't realize it went to overtime until then. And I was like, I got to watch the highlights in the morning. And I didn't actually watch the highlights till this morning. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, Sean, you kind of hit it in your previous video, but this team has faced a lot of adversity already. But the second you thought that they were done going through adversity, a game like this happens, and even more adversity you have to go through. And I understand it's a young team; these moments are going to happen. But Shauna, I'm stealing your thoughts from the previous video. Everyone on this roster is responsible for that, right? I mean, we can't look at one player. We can't look at Dwane Casey.
Yeah, because
people
were
like
like,
Killian Hayes. We can't look at Jalen Duren.
I could blame Killian for this, and it's
right?
like,
No,
that's it. Like that is an entire team.
When you are in the NBA and you are on a NBA roster, it is almost assumed. It is assumed that you are a good enough player to make any shot at the right time, make basketball moves to win, score when you need to win.
Yeah,
they scored 2 points in that last 3 minutes, and they only scored another three after that. So that was a 5 to 28 run.
Well, and guys, here's the other reality of it too. I know that, like, you know, with 3 minutes to go, like Jeff, like you said, it's like, oh, well, you know, 3 minutes to go, they're up by 14. We could beat traffic, you know, because it was we call that garbage time, right? The reason why it's called garbage time is because you generally think the game's over and because they put in their second unit players.
Yep.
Even though, like, to the fan, we take garbage time for granted, the actuality is that for the players that are playing in garbage time, those are their most important minutes.
They get paid too. Well,
they get paid too, but also, Jeff, Troy, these are their opportunities to show what they got.
Right.
I mean, these guys don't get many NBA minutes for all intents and purposes. Even though, like, a lot of these Clippers bench guys, like, you know, like Terrence Mann, like he ain't no scrub. It's not like he's, it's not like he's bad, but Amir Coffey, he's not getting too many minutes on a night to night basis. Even guys like Norman Powell and even a guy like Terrence Mann, like it's an opportunity to show, hey, this is what I can do, right? And so I know a lot of people like to dismiss, the second unit and when those people are playing, but that's the lesson of if you dismiss it, that's what can happen, because there are more than ever, there are guys in this league that can put buckets together and fast.
Right.
And I mean, you have a Clippers unit where everyone can shoot the three, everyone can score in transition, everyone can defend. And you have so many players that can get their own buckets. So, the idea of just, hey, this game's over, we can handle this, when you look at their second unit, Luke Kennard, John Wall, Norman Powell, they have an entire second unit of guys who could be starting for another NBA team.
And Sean, on top of that too, there's plenty of guys on that Clippers team, unlike the Pistons, that have been in those situations where they're down, they need a bucket, or they're down, whatever the score may be. The Pistons haven't been in a situation where they've been up that much and had to close a game out in 3 minutes. So it's them getting a little lackadaisical, but it's also the Clippers. I mean, they I don't want to call them all veterans, because Luke Kennard's been in the league for a handful of years, but those guys have seen different situations. Like John Wall, for example, has played in a lot of big games. So it was a team that knew what to do in those situations, and a team that did not know what to do in those situations. And I hate that that's not really an excuse, but that's kind of the reality of what transpired.
No, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But all right, let's talk about the next pieces of it. So we've talked about how, and I still maintain the idea that I don't think Dwane Casey's getting fired. I don't think last night, I don't think there's any game that can be a causation of Dwane Casey getting fired this season. There's people that have asked me in the comments, what's the point of keeping him around? Well, first of all, part of the value of having a guy like Dwane Casey is that he's such a stable head, because he's been through every single situation. If you wanted to have an NBA bingo card of the crap Dwane Casey's been through, or what people can go through, he's been through it all. Right. And last night, you listened to him in the press conference. Every player was super down on themselves, dejected, really upset. You could tell they wanted that win bad. Dwane Casey was just as calm as ever, kept his demeanor even keel, gave them credit, but and said, I'm proud of how our guys played for part of it, but exact same thing. At the end of the day, this is a make or miss league, and anything can happen if you don't, if you lose your focus for even 1 second. And the thing is he even is still saying we're learning and we're growing, but in the midst of learning and in the midst of growing, this is one of those learning moments where you have to have, and I said this in the live stream, after the game, this is where you have to have a come to Jesus moment. This is where in my opinion, where last year, this team had a team meeting after, before the Boston game to talk about what they need to change. I think that's a moment where, if they haven't had a team meeting, I think it's got to be considered. And also, I think, in addition, I think you look at, the reality of how this league works is, even when you are rebuilding, you have to show signs of progress. You have to show things moving forward. And, I do wonder, if instead of, Dwane Casey, deciding to go into a front office role in the next offseason or two, if that could be decided for him and we could be having a conversation about a coach search in the next year or two. What are your guys' thoughts?
Well, my thoughts have never changed on Dwane. I mean, that's why it's hard for me to have conversations with people that, and this isn't a bad thing. I mean, fans are emotional. They're reactive. They're watching games just like we are. And I think we have a little bit of a different perspective because we cover the team. We talk about the team. We kind of know what's, we have at least an idea of what's going to happen, what the players are feeling, coaches. We watch all these pressers. And I know fans, when they watch how the season's played out, they've watched Dwane Casey's tenure, they get frustrated. Oh, he has all these 20-win seasons. I think we look at the bigger picture, and I've brought up this point multiple times with Dwane. He's not going to be your coach of the future. And that's not saying he's going to get fired, but the man is the second oldest coach in the NBA currently right now. And I think even Troy not firing him, there has to be, I mean, people assume that Troy does not have a plan moving forward. And that's the most frustrating thing for me because, and I sound like a broken record bringing this up, but with the Red Wings, people act like Steve Yzerman didn't have a plan for Jeff Blashill. Of course he had a plan. He just didn't let anybody know what the plan was. And then when he finally got fired, and here comes Derek Lalonde. Oh, I actually like Derek Lalonde. And the season's going, and no one's talking about Jeff Blashill and all the people talking about why he should have been fired. I think that's the same thing with Dwane right now is when Troy feels it's necessary, when he feels like it's that time for this team to compete, to try and make a plan up the playoffs, whatever it may be. I don't think Dwane's going to be here because simply I don't think he's coaching that long in the NBA. And maybe next year, but even then, I do think a change is on its way. And to your point, Sean, it could be a situation where he is forced out, or at least there's a negotiation happening with Troy saying, "Hey, come join us in the front office. We'll get your replacement." Whether it's
I would still think that Casey would be part of the organization.
Yeah,
like kind of my sentiment.
Absolutely. And he deserves to be. I mean, for a guy that's been, it didn't ask for what he was given, the cards that were dealt with the rebuilds he's had to deal with, and now another rebuild. That's where I feel it's how I've always felt. There's going to be a time and a place. Troy's going to make a decision. I have faith in Troy to make that decision. And there's going to be a time, just like when Memphis went out and got Taylor Jenkins, they felt like, all right, let's take the next step. I don't think they're there yet. You clearly see how the team's playing. Even if you fire Dwane now, I don't think, maybe they respond to that and they play hard, but regardless, to your point, Sean, why do it now? I mean, keep Dwane in that locker room with a young team, keep these guys developing. I think everyone can say they were happy with what they saw last night out of all the young players. They just got to find a way to close games. And that's part of having a young team. So for me, with Dwane, I'm fine with him right now. I'm not going to sit here and critique Dwane over what. I mean, if this team had legitimate playoff expectations and they were doing this, then we can critique him. But right now, we didn't even expect, even with Cade, we had this conversation. We were trying to talk fans off the ledge of them making the play-in with Cade. And without Cade, it's kind of transpired not exactly how I expected, but pretty damn close to what we expected. So moving forward, I'm not concerned about Dwane or what his future is. I know Troy's going to address it. And when he does, I know he'll bring in the right guy. So I'm not overreacting.
Troy, I think too, like to that point, like of what Jeff's talking about, I think a lot of times in sports, we just, whatever we look at, something that happens or goes wrong, or there's a mishap on the court, or there's decisions being made, we always look at the coaching because that's the most visible face of the organization, the most visible decision maker that we can see. Right. And, I understand why, why people would want to make that look or like have that opinion. And like, I understand why that's like the easiest opinion to have. But again, like, as Jeff just said, like you can't have your coach puts you in a 14-point lead. Your team has to be able to go out there and execute. And even then, like if you're going to fire your coach in the middle of the season, you're going to do it because this team didn't meet the expectations that were set forth for them. You don't have to look hard in the sports world to give an analogy. Like this isn't Nathaniel Hackett. This isn't the Denver Broncos bringing in a head coach to come and bring this team a Super Bowl. And then they go and get Russell Wilson, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Like this isn't like we didn't bring in Donovan Mitchell. We didn't we're not 27, 28-year-old players on this team. Like half of our stars can't legally drink.
Right. And to your point too, before Troy goes, I would ask people, if you feel like Dwane, you should be fired today. What do you feel like Dwane is holding this team that much back to what they were supposed to be? And I would argue no. I don't think if you fired Dwane, they wouldn't all of a sudden play, excellent defensively or play excellent defensively, find a way to, it doesn't work like that. I'm sorry.
Right. So, because if you fire him, what happens is someone else on the staff takes over as the interim head coach. So you do realize from a player development standpoint, from an overall scheme standpoint, not much is going to change for the rest of the season.
Right.
So literally, why not have one of the best basketball minds, one of the best player development coaches, a guy that the team clearly respects, and the fact that Isaiah Stewart came out and made the point to say that isn't coaching, that's on us.
Right.
Players only do that when they actually stand by their coach.
Right. And I think Isaiah Stewart's statement for me says it all, right? And you guys just touched on that. But Sean, you brought up a point too. And unfortunately, I think a lot of Pistons fans are going to forget this. And this is another thing that you guys talked about in your previous video, is that Dwane Casey is the same coach that brought that team, with that lineup, still without Cade, to being up by 14 points with 3 minutes remaining against Paul George, against John Wall, against Luke Kennard, against Marcus Morris, right?
Like he made adjustments. Like this lineup was an inherently different coached game than how he was approaching other games.
Right. So I guess where I'm getting at, and we saw this team knock off the Warriors, right? I mean, there's other games too that we can point at, closing in overtime against the Mavs. But Killian's kind of coming out hard. So there's games this season, there's games last season we can look at, even the season before that we can look at. Sure, there's a lot of losses in there, but there's also some wins and tremendous growth. And this is something that we've been talking about literally since the Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond years, even as a Dwane Casey coach, is that he can develop players, and we see the way that he's doing that with this young core. And again, there is no way that you can tell me that the Pistons are so beyond, exceeding their expectations because of a poor coaching by Dwane Casey, especially with Cade Cunningham, who's injured. So I guess, where I'm saying is I'm with you guys. Probably not the long-term coach just strictly because of his age. But as far as this season, that's all about growth. That's all about development. That's about even competing against teams that we saw last night. Even though with the loss, they still played their hearts out in overtime, right? There's no argument to be made, in my opinion, that Dwane Casey needs to be fired tomorrow.
Yeah, there wasn't a lack of effort for sure. I mean, you look at, and listen, like people are like, well, what's the reasons that you keep Dwane Casey? Well, to answer your question, if you were to tell someone a month and a half ago that the Pistons were going to lose by 11 in a game that they led, where Killian Hayes scored 18 points, they would say, hold up, Killian scored 18 points?
Right.
Because there was a point a month and a half ago, his offensive game in his NBA career looked in jeopardy. Now, Killian looks like a whole different dude. Jaden Ivey has been towards the top of the rookie leaderboards ever since stepping into Detroit, partially because of Dwane Casey. You look at Isaiah Stewart, who had a phenomenal game last night, 21 points, 8 of 10 from the field, 3 of 4 from beyond the arc. Offensively, a completely different player today than he was when he came into the league. Dwane Casey and his staff don't get any credit for that. Like that's where we have to stop being so selective and picking and choosing the things that we give credit for and the things that we criticize for. And that's the thing that, like, to me, that I don't understand, is the fact that, like, even though, like, we are talking about all these negative things and that we can acknowledge that there are things to criticize, damn it, there's things to praise too. Mm-hmm. And it's like we can keep saying, like, yeah, well, they're losing a lot of games and we need a winner in Detroit, and we can take all of our city's frustrations out on these guys all you want. These 19, 20, 21-year-old kids are not at fault for the years of dysfunction that were caused by Joe Dumars and Stan Van Gundy. They don't deserve to get the blunt of the criticism for decisions that were made before Jalen Duren was even born.
Right.
That's just the truth. Like we can say whatever we want about, like, oh, well, the rotations, oh, well, the minutes, oh, well, the adjustments. But Killian Hayes is a completely different player today than when he started in the league. Even Hamidou Diallo has developed under him. Even Kevin Knox has remnants of an NBA life because of him. Christian Wood might go get a significant contract when, before playing with Dwane Casey, he was going to be in China.
Yeah.
Like, you can keep picking and choosing whatever you want, but you can't take away the stuff that's flat out on his resume. Mm-hmm. That's what gets me fired up, is we're so damn selective and there's no integrity behind it. Like,
Yep.
God.
Yeah, and it goes back to the same point, and this is said many times in the sports world. It's much easier to replace a coach than a player. So guys are going to look at Dwane, and they have no other reason. They're looking at the roster. They like the young talent, and they feel like Dwayne's at fault for everything, which is not fair. And to your point, Sean, bringing up all the good things you've seen, nobody wants to do that. They want to talk about the bad things. Well, what about throwing the leads or playing as bad as they are defensively? But they won't give him credit for the good things people see, which I've seen a lot of this season, which is player development, trusting Killian to start him. When me and you, we made videos talking about Killian Hayes, what his future is, not even just for the Pistons, in the NBA, and he's revived his career. In basketball, period. And he's revived his career, but nobody wants to talk about that. It's well, yeah, they might have had a 14-point lead with 3 minutes left, but they threw it. So Dwayne stinks. Like, it's not fair to Dwayne. It really isn't. I mean, let's be honest here. Do people trust Troy to make the right decisions? Yes or no? And I think a majority of people would say yes. So the fact that he has not fired him, all of a sudden now you're not going to trust him. It's not the way I'm going with this, but it's people's opinions.
If you would have told me that Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart starting together would be averaging 21 points and 18 rebounds a game, I would say, man, that's a great third year by them. Mm-hmm. That's their first week. That's their first slate of games that they've started together.
And are people going to give him credit for that? Or are they going to say, well, he waited so long to put those guys together, but they're not going to give him credit for how well they played together on the court? I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, which by the way, like we can say what we want about, like, you know, Jalen Duren, and, like, you know, like obviously we had conversations about whether or not he should have been starting at the beginning of the season, but I think you can tell by how he's been playing ever since he started in the starting lineup that they brought him along the right way, because when he did start, he looked ready for it. Right? And that's what you want to see. Like that is exactly what you want out of your team. So again, we can go, you know, like we can go around, like, and this is probably the most negative we've been about the Pistons on this podcast. And, you know, like I don't, and it's not that, like, you know, I don't mind being negative, right? Like, I don't mind, like, you know, bringing up criticism when it's valid, right? But but that's exactly it, is when it's warranted. And again, like, I understand people's frustrations. I know people, you know, see this type of stuff and they go, man, the ineptitude, like what in the heck is going on? Like, when are these days going to be behind us? But the simple truth is, for me, when I think of those days, I think of when Anthony Davis scored 63 points in a Pelicans uniform in the Little Caesars Arena against Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson, and Marcus Morris, and a group of guys that had no direction. I think of watching Blake Griffin on his last legs, you know, like in the 2019-2020 season, clearly a shell of himself after trying to carry this team to the playoffs because he had to play 30 plus minutes a night just to do it. Like that, like, to me, when I think of Pistons ineptitude, and again, this is a franchise I have a lot of admiration for, a lot of respect for, you know, like, want to, like, tell the story of the Pistons in the best light possible. But when you think of, like, the ineptitude of the Pistons, that's what should come to mind. This is the buildings of a rebuild. The fact that we have players like this in Detroit, we've been clamoring for talent like this in our city for 20 years. Mm-hmm. We have it. It will produce soon. It will. It might not feel like it, but damn it, it will. I promise you. But
especially with the assets they have coming up, they still have a bright future. I think I would be shocked, and I've seen this conversation circle, and we don't even have to talk about this because I've seen people go off the rails, fans talking about Cade, talking about, is he a bust because he's missing game? I mean, idiotic conversations. And the fact that they're struggling this season, and it's making, before the season, it was excitement, love the future of this young core. And now no Cade, they're struggling. They're learning how to close games, and now everything goes out the window. What are we, 30-something games in? It's like, guys, what's happening? I mean, we all talked about how long of a process they would be, and it would be a couple of years before you see results and you see free agency play out. You see what Troy does moving forward. But it seems like in 30 games, everyone's willing to check out on a rebuild. It's like I'm confused
Right.
how we got to this point.
Well, and again, I totally understand if fans don't want to tune in to regular losses each and every night, and if it is, and
absolutely, that's fair.
if it isn't entertaining for them, like listen, like I can't blame you for that, right? Like we are the hardest of hardcore, where we're going to tune in pretty much every single night, no matter what, because we're sickos. You know what I mean? Like we're disgusting humans. But like in all seriousness, like the main piece of it is like, I like, if you are going to judge this team, don't judge it on the unrealistic parameters and expectations that you put on the team, when in reality, like we even talked about before this season, we even talked about in our predictions, like it's very important that you listen to what these teams say when they give you like a message, because what did they say during media day this year? The goal of this season, we're going to learn to compete. And everyone heard, we're going to compete. No. Learn to compete. And I think last night they just had their harshest lesson yet.
Sure.
But with that, guys, speaking of harsh lessons, difficult realities, the NBA had Christmas Day games the other day, and man, first of all, this was probably the most basketball I've watched on a Christmas Day in a while, and I just got to say, it is the closest thing we get to playoff basketball, before we get there. And dude, it was so good, man.
I think this Philadelphia 76ers, Sean, I think they had a little coming out party. I know it's the Knicks. I know, we didn't really have extreme high expectations on them this year. They did, have a 7 or 8 game winning streak. But the way Harden played,
the Knicks
he
are
hit
one
some
of the
shots.
4 teams in the league that have a top 10 offense and defense. Like that's a good win.
Right. And James Harden had little glimpse of his Houston days. And if he can be half that on this roster with the Tobias Harris and a Joel Embiid, team, especially when they get Maxey back, watch out, East.
Right. Also, can I just say, wasn't it pretty apparent on Christmas Day that this Jalen Brunson guy can play basketball pretty well?
Oh,
yeah. So to everyone that told me that he couldn't. Anyway, Jeff, what was your personal highlight of Christmas Day?
It's got to be the Boston Celtics. And I picked Milwaukee last year, even without Chris Middleton. And when we'll see come postseason time with Chris Middleton, because Giannis struggled. But the thing that Boston does so well, and they did well last year, nothing's changed. And I got to give credit to Coach Mazzulla here, is what they do defensively. And if you combine that with Jason Tatum having an MVP season, and as well as he dropped a 40 bomb on the Bucks on Christmas, this team is terrifying. I mean, you get Malcolm Brogdon, things are coming together. The Celtics, even without Ime Udoka, are still just as, and we'll see how much Ime Udoka's value comes postseason time, because Missoula, it's going to be an adjustment for him. The team looks terrifying. I mean, what they did to the Bucks, I think they match up well with Giannis, with what they can do defensively, and they showed why right now they're, to me at least, playing like the best team in the East. I still think Milwaukee will be dangerous come postseason time because you got Giannis Antetokounmpo. But right now, the Celtics are playing the best basketball to me in the East right now. They're scary.
Jeff, I'd go one step further. They look like the best team in the NBA to me right now. I mean, when Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are firing like this, Troy, I would argue that they're unbeatable, because last night, or on Christmas Day, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum combined for 41 points from Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown scored 13 of his 29 in the fourth. And that's the other thing about this pairing, guys. Like we were talking, like I remember we actually like an early episode of this pod, like last season, was talking about, should Boston blow up the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum pairing, because that was the discourse happening back then, right? But the perfect thing about this pairing is that there's no ego.
Mhm.
Like Jason Tatum is more than okay with Jaylen Brown being the closer, taking the ball in the fourth quarter, being the guy to take those tough shots. And Jaylen
Brown
Brown's
has
more
no
than okay
problem
with
with Tatum being the face of the franchise, right?
Yeah, and
So-
Brown has no problem with Jason Tatum out there going out and getting his.
Yeah. And the thing that impresses me the most also about the Celtics, because there's plenty of things, is how well Jason and Jalen have adjusted to now last year losing in the finals. You saw how bad they needed a playmaker, and you went out and got Brogdon.
Losing their head coach, like you brought
In
up,
losing their head coach, all the adversity they faced. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they're getting better being playmakers. Because again, when you're that talented, when you're Tatum or you're Brown, you're going to have to learn to get your teammates involved. I mean, they're drawing so much attention defensively. And with all the talent the Celtics have, when they're clicking on all cylinders, man, like especially with what they have coming off the bench, Grant Williams, now they have Brogdon coming off the bench. They Robert Williams now. I mean, they're terrifying. I got to say, I mean, to me right now, they're the favorite to come out of the East, but Milwaukee's right behind them. But even it's just absurd to me. I would have never expected this. I thought they'd face some adversity and hit a wall a little bit without Ime Udoka. They seem to be they're clicking on all cylinders right now, and that's why I still feel like Jason Tatum's MVP. I really do believe that.
Yeah, the crazy thing, guys, is if you really look at it and like briefly bringing up the Pistons again for 10 seconds. This is why I feel comfortable with whenever the coaching search will begin, because if you look at this Boston Celtics coaching staff last year, guys. There were 2 assistants on that staff that are now phenomenal NBA head coaches in their own right. Joe Mazzulla for the Boston Celtics and Will Hardy for the Utah Jazz. Both of them were on that staff with Ime Udoka, who in his own right in the next year or two will get his own will get an NBA coaching job again. Right? Like he almost got one a month ago. Like he's gonna he's gonna get another one. Like that's just the reality. But again, just looking at like what they've done and like how good they've been able to be, and like you said, just how consistent they've been. But like the fact that not only did they have like an interim coach come in, but the youngest coach in the NBA, 36 years old,
right,
and they barely miss a beat. That's an MVP caliber season. 100%.
Certainly is.
So what you're saying is it's up to the players to go out there and execute, is what you're saying. More than
it's almost like the coach can give you the parameters and help you with the keys of success, but it's ultimately on the players.
Got you.
Yeah, who would have thought? But anyway, another team, speaking of it's on the players and a group of players that feel pretty comfortable right now, the Memphis Grizzlies. One thing that I thought was really interesting was Ja Morant said last week, the team he's most worried about in the NBA is the Boston Celtics. And Malik Andrews immediately came back and said, "You're not worried about the West?" He said, "Nope, we're good." And then on Christmas Day, the Golden State Warriors, without Steph Curry, with only 3 road wins to their name this season, a team that is in the play-in standings and would currently be 10th, and it's the same record as the Minnesota Timberwolves, came out and kicked their asses on national television on Christmas Day in the first Christmas game in Memphis Grizzlies franchise history. Guys, I personally love this Memphis Grizzlies roster, but I am getting some real shades that this group is going to have to get a real wake-up call before they reach the top of the mountain.
Sure. And that might have been a small wake-up call. Yeah, but I think there's something bigger coming with this Grizzlies team. But they're a team that we've been talking very highly about, this year. And we love their young core. We know that they had to face a lot of adversity to get even, where they are today, especially with, having the position to draft Ja number 2 overall in 2019, and how much they've been able to put some little pieces around them and those guys have developed. We think of a guy like Desmond Bane and Dylan Brooks, especially, and Jaren Jackson Jr., but Yeah, I mean, although you're missing Steph, you still have a Warriors team that can light you up with Klay Thompson and some other guys as well. Poole had a
Draymond
great,
Green played a pretty
yeah,
damn good game too, at a double-double
yeah,
with only 3 points. Like, that's
sure,
damn impressive.
sure. Poole had a great game as well. So they're a team that I would have a hard time saying they're going to make it out of the West, but still, I still have them getting out of the first round. Maybe,
But Troy,
yeah.
Here's where it gets interesting. If they were to be in the first round, and if they were to indeed, be, like the third seed right now,
Yeah.
If they were to end up like towards the top of the standings, there's a realistic chance that this team might have to face Luka Doncic in the first round. There's a realistic chance that this team might have to face Steph Curry in the first round. There's a realistic chance this team might have to face Damian Lillard in the first round. So even though I firmly believe that the Memphis Grizzlies are good enough to win a championship and are inexperienced enough to where I could see them only winning one game this playoffs and being out in the first round.
Well, yeah. I'm a little more optimistic than that with this team, but I can at least see where you're coming from.
My problem with the Grizzlies is a similar issue. I think the Grizzlies are in a better position, but the same issue I have with Luka and the Mavericks. As much as I love Ja, love watching Ja play, and Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, Dylan Brooks, they have good pieces around Ja. What we talked about last week with needing to get a Robin to Ja's Batman, as much as I love Desmond Bane, these guys are good role players. They're really good, but when moments are huge, you need somebody alongside Ja that can get you a consistent 20 plus. And they don't have that currently, and it's similar with the Mavericks. They need, and Christian Wood's been playing really well, so that's kind of been the guy lately. But the Memphis Grizzlies, that's why the comment Ja had about the Golden State Warriors is, listen, I love confidence. That's the number one thing. Obviously, these athletes wouldn't get to where they were if they didn't have confidence. But at the same time, they're going to need a little more. If you're talking about a Grizzlies team making a finals run, unless Ja has a miraculous postseason and everybody around him plays exceptional, I just don't think they have anybody they can rely on besides Ja consistently. And that's kind of my issue with the Grizzlies. And
you want to know why?
We'll address that moving forward. Why? What's up?
Because Jaren Jackson needs to step the hell up.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you, I just don't think he's that dude. I love him. I think he's a great third player, fourth player on a championship team, but I think they're expecting him and Bane to be those guys, and I don't know if they are right now, at least.
Yeah,
Ja's exceptional. Ja's a superstar.
Yeah, they have a lot of guys surrounding Ja that play super hard, that are on good contracts. They're in a situation where where they're in a pretty luxurious spot where they can compete right now and not really have to worry about, like super expensive salaries. I do believe that this team does need to go out and get another co-star alongside Ja, to your point, because I think they are going to find themselves in a situation where, Ja's an incredible athlete and his game's amazing. He's truly one of the most unstoppable players in the league. But playoff basketball is different. And last year he had an injury, a freak injury that happens, right? Like he has a high flying game. In order for this team to be able to get through the playoffs, they need to guarantee that Ja's going to be on the court, right? And so I'm not worried about his overall injury. I'm not saying he's like a super injury prone player. It's just the way he plays the game is susceptible to injury.
Yeah.
So
and on top of that, with the workload, that's the same thing we say about Luka. It's like Luka's been durable, but when you put that much on a player all season, come postseason time, you're going to get tired no matter who you are. So that's what I worry about, is somebody to take some of the edge off for Ja. So postseason, he's as fresh as can be. And he has somebody he can legitimately rely on to go to war with, that if he struggles, somebody can step up, and not just step up and get you 15. I'm talking score and have a big game for you. I just don't think they have that consistently. As much as Bane can get you 30 one night, can you rely on Bane if Ja's struggling in a series? I don't think so.
Right. 100%. And, That's going to be the thing that's really interesting to me is, how do these teams, address address the gaps and the holes that they have? Like is there going to be a team that's going to make a big change at the trade deadline? Because there's been a lot of rumors about players potentially wanting new homes. James Harden potentially going back to Houston was a Woj bomb that I got on Christmas Day that I was not expecting.
After a win.
I mean, like after like this comes out in the midst of like a 7-8 game win streak. Like
Sounds
when you guys
right.
are playing well.
Yeah.
Also, like the whole Trae Young situation and everything that's been going on in Atlanta. By the way, I saw a post from NBA Central today, and according to them, this is via Bet Online.
Oh, I
The
hate
the best odds to land Trae Young if the Hawks were to trade him. Number 1, the Dallas Mavericks. Number 2, the Miami Heat, the Celtics, the Nuggets or the Lakers, the Spurs, the Pelicans, the Clippers, and it goes so on and so forth. Listen.
Man, that bullshit made me sneeze.
Yeah, 100%. But if the Dallas Mavericks somehow ended up with both Trae Young and Luka Doncic, the Hawks should be relegated, right?
I'm curious about that fit. Like, because again,
but like from like the hindsight of that draft, like they should both be relegated, right? Like the Hawks should be relegated if they gave up both Luka and Trae. Like they should be relegated, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Hawks. I mean, come on.
And who would they give? Who would the Mavs give up? I mean, they would have to
what
make their
assets? Yeah,
right.
What assets in Dallas? Like, even it just doesn't.
Kemba Walker,
sense, but
couple first round picks.
Yeah, because basically, if you do that, you're admitting that you're center piecing your franchise around DeJounte Murray. But again, there's nothing Dallas has. There's no package that could compensate Trae Young's ability, in my opinion.
By the way, it's looking more and more like getting DeJounte Murray for Atlanta was an insurance policy than it was going to get Trae Young a co-star.
Sure. Right.
You know what I mean?
It's unfortunate.
Yep. But speaking of our insurance policy, Jeff, my old reliable, my guy, do you have anything for us today?
Yes.
As far as the segment of the week.
I do. So, guys, with the segment rolling around, I want to get away from the coaches being fired. This week, I'm going to change it up. We're going to go back to trading. Would you trade for this player? In this instance, I'm going to bring up maybe a player for the Pistons. Would you think about, if you're Troy Weaver, trading him away?
I think I know who this is.
So you might be correct, Sean, because you're good at reading me a lot of the time. So here we go. Number 1, I'm going to start with a player on the Pistons. If you're Troy Weaver, you pick up the phone or you hang up the phone. All right. So player number 1, if you're Troy Weaver with the trade deadline approaching, and somebody calls you and inquires about Saddiq Bey, what do? You keep him and see how it plays out, let him develop, or do you try and maximize on other teams looking at the potential of what Saddiq could be? You might have to throw in assets. What would you do if you're Troy Weaver? Try to flip him, or would you keep him? Troy,
I'm at least picking up the phone, but you're going to have to give me a really good package to deal Saddiq Bey, in my opinion. I'm talking an already established player. I'm hoping you throw in a first-round pick as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking the call, but I can't guarantee you I'm making a deal.
So
I'm optimistic about making a deal, but I cannot guarantee it.
If I'm Troy, I personally keep Saddiq through the end of the season. I don't think there's, I don't think the price on Saddiq changes in the off season from the trade deadline. I think there's only incentive to see if he can improve upon what we've seen this season. And if he can begin to turn it around, and if not, then maybe you can have conversations about flipping Saddiq in the offseason, say on draft day to get another first round pick, say, in a trade to go and get an established star, like Troy said. Like, I think, in my opinion, there's just not an incentive to do it now. Like I understand, like, if you want to just ensure that you get something, then yeah, I could see that. But at the same time, in my personal opinion, it's a very similar situation to Jeremy Grant, where you have little to no purpose of dealing him before the deadline. There's really no reason to majorly change this roster up. Give it the rest of the season, see where Sadiq ends up, and then from there, the value is going to be pretty much the same anyway. So if you do want to trade him, just wait till the summer.
Mm-hmm. Especially how the season's played. I agree with both of you guys. I think the offer would have to be really enticing for me to trade him at the deadline. But let him finish the season. Maybe his stock rises. We've seen Troy, at least in the past, be more comfortable when he keeps players towards the draft or just the offseason. He seems to work out that way. So for Sadiq, keep him for right now. We'll see what offers arise in the future. But the next player I'm going to bring up, not a Piston, but a player that we talked about last week, I believe. And that's from an organization that we tend to crap on a lot. But maybe we could rescue this specific player out of that organization who has ties to the state of Michigan. And Sean, you know exactly where I'm going with this. Kyle Kuzma.
You son of a bitch.
Kyle Kuzma. And I don't know what the deal would look like, but if you're Troy Weaver and the Wizards call you and they say, listen, we got Kyle Kuzma on the table, we could talk a trade, what would you do if you're Troy Weaver?
Yeah, I'm picking up the phone call and I'm trying to make a deal. And that's a guy, I mentioned draft picks, and I'm not expecting a draft pick if I'm looking at a guy like Sadiq Bey potentially, moving away. I mean, I would do that and some other guys in a heartbeat. I think Kuzma's a guy that in LA was a very good player. I think the Lakers in some way are still kicking themselves for moving him away to the Wizards, especially when they got in return with, just what Russ has been the past couple of years in LA. But I do think he's a guy that helps this team tremendously. I think another great thing about this would be developed under who else then? Dwane Casey. Imagine what Dwane Casey could do with him in his offense, right? So there's a lot of potential there. Then you look at next season with Cade Cunningham back now and a first round pick and a free agent. I mean, a lot changes in this organization if we could go get a guy like that. And he's the kind of guy that I think we need to turn the table a little more in the direction that we're trying to go to. So, yes, I'm picking up that phone call in a heartbeat, Jeff. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I'm all about it. I am absolutely all about getting Kyle Kuzma on this team because I know a lot of people looked at his, at his third year with the Lakers or when he was in a condensed role on that team, what he was being asked to do. But Kyle Kuzma is a flat out winner. I mean, when you look at what he did for that championship team and everything that he meant to that championship team, he did all the dirty work. And he was more than willing to do all the dirty work. But in addition, he's shown in Washington that he can be a reliable second or third option if you need him to be. And so for him to be a guy that understands what it takes to be a winning basketball player, a guy that could put up 20 plus points a game, a guy who can shoot, 35+% from beyond the arc, a guy who can rebound the basketball pretty well, like just a guy who makes good basketball plays, who can play well on both ends, who can switch on multiple positions. Like he's a guy who, like to Troy's point, where he's 27, like he's still insanely young, but at the same time, he's heading into his prime. And I think he would be, starting to go on an upward trajectory at the same time that the Pistons are. I think it's a perfect fit. And the fact that he's from Flint, just makes it that much sweeter. So to me, it's just a home run. Like, in my opinion, I would be shocked if there's not at least a report that Troy Weaver at least doesn't pick up the phone and inquire about it.
Yeah, and especially an organization that you can fleece. I think it's a deal that I would love to see Troy try and make. And Kyle, obviously, as a player, you love everything he provides, the shooting, defensively, which he's improved on over the last couple of years. Like you said, Sean, has championship experience, has played with LeBron and AD, knows what it takes to win. And I think you drop him on this team, they need a guy like Kyle Kuzma right now. So, again, I'm all for it. We'll see what a deal would look like, but I think Troy could get it done. But there you go. Let's put 2 players today.
And you're going to be hard-pressed finding players in that role that are going to be better than Kyle Kuzma.
Right.
Like in my opinion, like if you're talking about like my wish list of who I want the Pistons to go after, like this off season or over the next couple of seasons. Like I would certainly say like a guy like Kyle Kuzma certainly on there. A guy like Grant Williams from Boston certainly on there. Like guys who can shoot the three, play really hard on defense, and know what it takes to win basketball games. And that's exactly what Kyle Kuzma is. So yeah, like when I saw the reports that Kyle Kuzma could potentially be gettable, I know a lot of people, saw Kuzma and again, they see him as a LeBron teammate. People generally, devalue a player because of that. But again, if you've watched Kyle Kuzma play, you can tell that he can play.
Yeah, no doubt. Another person who gets the city. So
yeah, and yeah, he fits the vibe, man. He's tough. He might wear weird sweaters to games sometimes, but like
might dye his hair different colors, but
yeah, I mean, we had Dennis in Detroit. We're used to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Any other players, Jeff, or was that about it?
Oh, those are the two for this week.
I like it. That you read my mind. I was like, when you were like players we could trade, I was like, he's gonna say Kyle Kuzma. He's gonna say Kyle Kuzma. At first he doesn't.
I've been sitting on him. I've been waiting for a good time to bring it up.
I absolutely love it. But Troy, with that, it is time to end the episode the only way we know how, and that is to do from Mount Rushmore. I figured adding an effect to it this time. Why not? But anyway, Troy, go ahead.
Absolutely, Sean. And today we have a fun one, and I think the one we're doing today obviously has a part
I want a
two.
boring one, Troy.
Yeah. And obviously we're going to have a part 2 to it in reverse. But today we're going to be doing the Mount Rushmore of most overrated NBA players of all time. I'll start. Now, this one is a little tough because he's still a great NBA player. He's still a guy that averaged 20-plus points in this league 3 years in a row, but that's kind of it. Didn't really do much else. Yao Ming. Yao Ming's the name. Listen, again, great player, but the hype around him to this day, and I know really he's done more for basketball, especially in China. I know what he means to the game. I know how much he's helped the revenue of the NBA, just being that global sensation, especially from a land like China, and taking number 1 overall. And again, being a good NBA player. But for me, I when I look at our lifetime of who the press has just created this magnificent, once in a generational player that we had in this league for 10 plus years, Yao Ming, 6-time All-Star. I just don't see where all the hype is with him as a player. Yao Ming has to be on my list. Agree, disagree?
But no, I can see Yao Ming. Listen, respect to him, but if we're talking overrated, I mean, Yao Ming nationally, globally is loved, but maybe that just because of where he came from and how big he was. I mean,
I think he gets celebrated for what he means to the country of China and to the game of basketball over there. And he was, when healthy, he was an all-time dominant type big, but when push comes to shove, there was never a situation where we thought Yao Ming was playing in June.
Right. He wasn't available.
Right. That's exactly it. And it's funny that you bring up Yao Ming, because when I start my Mount Rushmore of most overrated NBA players of all time, I'm going to go with his teammate, Tracy McGrady. Now, I love T-Mac. The guy's a bona fide bucket. When he was at the apex of his powers, he was one of the most powerful, two guards that we've seen in this league. He, at the peak of his powers, this guy averaged 32 plus points a game. And this was around 02-03 when it was hard to average 30 plus points a game. But what's the iconic T-Mac moment outside of the game where he scored
13 points?
Yeah, or the playoff game where he scored like 10 points in 3 seconds or something crazy like that. Which, by the way, Jeff Van Gundy was like, we got lucky, we sucked tonight. That wasn't even a moment where they were celebrating in the moment. outside of that, like what's the highlight? Like
Where's
what?
the
Like
finals run?
yeah, like
Where's the playoff run?
yeah, exactly. Like if you look at where he's been and you look at what he did all throughout his career, and even and you talk about like a fall from grace too, like once he hit 30, I know part of that was injury, but like, when you talk about like this was a guy that was being revered and talked about like, as like a guy who could come in and be like a Kobe era parent or like in that type of class of talent and echelon, but like not even close in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, and I'm going to go somewhere, someone that currently plays in the NBA today, somebody that maybe that you can call this bias, because I do have a little bias towards this specific player, and I'm not the biggest fan of his, and I do think he's overrated for what people, at least in the market he plays in, what they think he is and what I think he is, and that's Julius Randle. Because let's be honest here, Julius Randle, good player, but to be a number one on, the New York Knicks for the last, 4 years, and he's played in one playoff series, and he was signed there to be the solution to New York. You're bringing a guy who has a name. He's been on 3 different teams. He was with LA, went to the Pelicans, had a breakout season, went to New York, and the numbers he puts up, people bring up inflated numbers or numbers that, you average 23 points a game, but what does it actually do? I mean, Julius Randle, to me, he's not a great defender. He could score points, but what has that gotten him with the New York Knicks? And I get there's a lot more issues with the New York Knicks than just Julius Randle, but when I look at overrated and the term and what that means, I do think Julius Randle, for what he's widely regarded as and what he means to the Knicks, I do think it's overrated. As much as I like Julius Randle, he's probably your second, maybe third best player. I'll go second. I'll be friendly.
And
on
in
a
some ways,
championship
he's
team.
kind of a stat pounder.
I think to me, like I think the reason why I don't know if I'd call him overrated, because I don't know if anyone like views him in like this like higher upper echelon of the league. Like I think Julius Randle in the grand scheme of things is a guy who's like a fringe all-star every year. Like when I think of like guys like if we're talking about like most overrated players of all time, I would go Jeff and someone who I think was in a very similar situation, Julius Randle, and it's a guy that's Amari Stoudemire, who's a guy that at one point was revered as one of the best players in the league, as a guy who was an athletic freak of nature and who was viewed as this huge threat and was viewed as a top 5, top 10 guy in the world at one point. He didn't do jack shit. He went to New York. He had one great season or one great half of a season. Didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like to me, like when I think of like most overrated like NBA players, like to me, like Julius Randle is in like a bundle of guys in the league today that are all doing the same thing, And I think that like we've gotten smart to that. Whereas I think like Amari Stoudemire was one of the biggest fraud superstars we've ever had in this league.
Yes, but with Julius is in an alpha role. Like he's like Stoudemire at times. You saw him take a back. Like Julius is that dude. That is what he's as of right now. He's in a role where he's the number one option on a team that makes the playoffs and gets bounced immediately. I just don't think he's averaged 20 points.
That was Amari when he was on the Knicks too.
No,
that's what he did.
Numbers, and we'll see how Julius's career plays out. But I just think his numbers are inflated on a team that never has success. So to me, I think he's a little overrated. Maybe not the most overrated of all time, but he's overrated to me.
Right. No, that's definitely like, again, like I'm not clamoring and saying he's a star. Like I'm just saying, I just don't think people view him as anything special. That's what I'm saying. I'm maybe being more insulting. But Troy, what is your final person to have on this Mount?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that. I want to go Stoudemire in a lot of ways, but you kind of said that. I'm trying to think of guys maybe who were winners, but didn't contribute as much as history likes to say. I'm trying to think of a name with that kind of role, because we know there's some out there.
Robert Horry.
Yeah, that was kind of where my head myself. Robert Horry, I guess, has to be up there. He did hit some big shots. 6-time champion.
He averaged under 25 minutes a game.
Right. Like everyone knows that name in basketball, Big Shot Bob, right? Like, was he that big of a influence on those teams?
Guess his playoff averages.
7?
7.9 points and 5.6 rebounds.
Yeah, right. So to my points that you backed up, I think he has to be on my list.
That's fair.
Yeah, but like that shows, by the way, though, just how much winning can mean to your legacy and what it does to your image and what it does to like
Right.
to the respect, right? Like
Right, because that question of most overrated player, it goes in that 2 elements, right? There's the Amari Stoudemire who hype, multi-level all-star, didn't win anything. Then you got a guy like Robert Horry who won everything, but guys only averaged 7 points a game, right? Like, so yeah, it's definitely a twofold question. Interesting conversations.
Yeah, 100%. I agree 100. I agree wholeheartedly. By the way, who's another guy that deserves to be on this list? Hedo Turkoglu. For his 1 or 2 years where Hedo Turkoglu, where everyone was like, "Oh, Hedo Turkoglu, he's going to Toronto. This is gonna be gigantic." Name one career moment from Hedo Turkoglu.
He made a big shot against the Cavs when they upset them, right? Right?
Like, oh my gosh. Let's just before we end the pod, I just gotta know, what did Hedo Turkoglu average as a Toronto Raptor? So he signed that big ass contract with Toronto and immediately averaged 11 points a game. 11 points a game. Bloody hell. So,
And of course, we know it's no secret. Next week, we'll be looking at most underrated players of all time for Mount Rushmore.
So. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
I like it. But guys, speaking of underrated, this podcast, because you're not rating it on your podcast services, be sure you go do that, because this is From Half Court. Each and every week, we talk all things NBA basketball, Detroit Pistons, all of our pain and darkness that we feel inside in the basketball world. But if you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, be sure you share with your friends. Again, be sure you follow my guys on Twitter at JeffIF80, at TroySurrey44, and if you're feeling oh so generous, you can follow me as well at Sean Half Court. That is going to do it for today, though, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Sure you subscribe.